Hello, it's Jonathan. I have thought to do something different with my YouTube channel, and this time I'm going to do a analytical video for my books, like analysing the story and the images as well as other context as well. So yeah, that's in fact before we get right into it. So yeah, this video will cover all the books, even if the videos are tad lengthy. But regardless, I just thought this would be kind of fun, especially for those who are interested. So yeah, book one. So as you may have seen from my books, I've stuck to a colour palette of blues, greens, black and white, even brown as well. Yeah, to retain consistency in what the visuals are like. And not to mention, yeah, my visual style is rather simple. And I guess as a future improvement, I guess it could do with more texture, but because of what my current life is like at the moment, yeah, I could always make adjustments to it, but probably not at the moment. So yeah, this was done using Adobe Photoshop, and so yeah, I think I'll expand more of the visual style once we go further into it. Although I did think to design the first poster quite simply. You have the main dudes at the forefront, and also the way each of the books is titled, like the wording fitting, after the P. I thought that would be kind of cool, even if it's basic font and colour. And you can get more of a taster of what this first book's going to be, with the minor theme of vegetation. There's the main villain, one of the side characters, and yeah, it will take place mostly in greenery. So yeah, that's the first poster. Let's get on to the story. Alright, so the first page, simply to, I guess, just to show what, just like a basic look of what the whole story may look like, with the simple designs and even the kind of creatures we would encounter, for instance, the main members of the Legion, and then you have all sorts of goons which the Legion will be fighting along the way, and not to mention their pals as well. So Nicole here, she mainly sticks to a laser gun, and I've gone for a laser gun because actually trying to shoot bullets would not suit a family friendly product. So that explains that. And there's Pod with his ice and water powers, using the trident, plus fire as well. And even Arvin is an interesting one because, sorry about the background noise, and Arvin also has a variety of evolution based abilities. In this case, yeah, I think they look like claws, which going to, I know the thing is kind of small when I'm recording it, so it's either claws or a type of blast. So yeah, just a nice introduction. Showing what the Legion do. They help deter threats of Earth, mainly ones that are classified and more under the radar. And you do later find out, why these attacks are happening, and this Legion is what will be the main focus of the story. All right, so the first page of the villains, or the main villains, anyway. And so you have Xynthor and you have Orpheon. And yeah, from what the writing says, it doesn't. Yeah, I have to admit, it doesn't really specify who's who in this case, but because we'll be seeing him more, Orpheon, that's where the people will, more for those who read the books, they'll get more of an idea of who's who. And even though setting this time is it's I used to call it the Dark Fortress. I think it does have a better name somewhere, or at least give it a better name, because yeah, Dark Fortress is a bit basic, but you can see how Xyphor's own base is almost devoid of colour, almost matching his grey suit, or that's armour, even if it's a bit basic. And yeah, uh, yes, and compared to the Legion where they go to, like even Earth is more colourful, and there's plenty of other more colourful environments as well as you go through further through the story. Sorry, I'm going into this non-scripted, but I'll do my best. And what you'll see about each like villain, like main villain of each season. So in this case, it's Orpheon, and it has a bit of lime green. That's almost like the main colour for this book, and each colour represents one of the eternal elements, which is almost like the main MacGuffins of the story. For those who don't know what a MacGuffin is, it's basically an object a character cares about a lot when it comes to story. You would hear it a lot on videos if you're into that. So yeah, in this point, so we saw earlier that the Legion are fighting all sorts of goons, and they would all be coming from Xynthor, because as we later find out, he's keen to wipe away as many races as possible, or at least individuals, to prevent any more violence from happening. And by doing that, it makes other races go into fear to not fight or cause conflict themselves, because yeah, we would find out Zyphor is definitely one of the more powerful species, especially when he gets all the elements in the end. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, so the protagonist of the story, another fancy keyword for you there. It's the main character pretty much, and the opposite is the antagonist, to which Zyphor and Orpheum are in the story. And yeah, so this is the base. It would the inside will always have this color scheme. I've tried to be careful when it comes to um, making each area stand out. And this is what Zami looks like at first, just normal clothing, and pretty much for the rest of the story goes in his armor, which even stays the same despite like gaining, because it's like a made suit at first, handmade, and then he has the power of cubes, or Hermota, the cube element is called, which embodies all physical matter, which we would see later on. And yeah, so that's his the blaster, which you'll see on his forearms, basically his main weapons, and he does other ones as well, such as the cube ability he has later, alongside the blunt arm mechanism, which is basically like a blunt weapon. But yeah, this page and the following one shows Zami's current status quo, you could say, almost like the Legion. They're just under the radar at the minute, despite being a variety of beings on Earth. And then you have Zami, who is hang on a sec. Sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, so status quos. So yeah, Zami is trying to design weapons which constantly get rejected, and we would see all sorts of weapons which the base has, like the guns the servicemen use, and the crafts they use, and the 4x4s. So yeah, sadly these ideas are kind of getting rejected. It's kind of a meta aspect. Meta means just more acknowledgement of the real world, because yeah, it somewhat represents how anyone's ideas could get rejected. And I've had all sorts of rejected bits and bobs. So yeah, so it's just almost like a symbol of that. And just because your ideas get rejected, it doesn't mean that you can't go any further. And thanks to Mike later on in the story, he later does, which is I guess a tad contrived. For those who don't know, when it comes to stories, they're better pushed by character decisions instead of random events happening. But you could argue and say that Mike, as the founder of the Legion, is keen to find new people, and help Sammy from getting into like a rough position, like not being able to finish the flying vehicle, which is later seen in the story. So yeah, that's just a little bit for you. Okay, next page. So also in stories, despite having the status quo, a protagonist is like day to day will often have their low points, and Zammers in this case he keeps getting mocked and bullied all the time, which you would also see bits of later on in the story. And in this time he took it a bit too far. He's got his weapon rejected again. He's taken it out on someone, which is a serviceman, mind you, which as mentioned, they are like the police, the ambulance, and any other emergency service like merged together. Yeah, pretty busy job. Yeah, just representing the evolution of security and efficiency within Earth in the future, to which yeah, it's set to the future. I won't know where though. Probably mid this century, 21st century, just to state. And so yeah, that's just another. I guess like a trope which can often be seen in stories. Characters having low points, and that may lead to something more exciting later on, such as what will happen later. And we do have a brief cameo from Retron as well. He was meant to have grey hair, but I thought to make both him and Mike bald, just to represent their opposite views. Because as you know, like in the following page, Mike, as the founder of the Legion, is really keen to have the Legion to be more in the forefront, and think that a load of mixed abilities will be like a really good method for the future of security. But then you have Retron, who's really keen on his own ideas, which you'll see more of in book 4, and also in the next page, because he's been haunted by past extraterrestrial life. He's really not into other races, especially not trying to help with the Earth. And not to mention, he used to live in an era where he was like the top hero, only to get that taken away time and time again by the Legion. And in the crutches as well, he would have had a I would say like a leg injury. He was supposed to have, in fact, he could still have like robotic legs, like hidden under the jeans and shoes. Um, so yeah, let's get on to the next part. Oh yeah, this is meant to be the Avengers room. By the way, I think it would have been better to include a room to show more of. We'd like to show more. It's a room where the technology is created, but yeah, I think that's just time straight to which has kind of got it. But I can always make these improvements in future, and it still presents the kind of scene which the story needed to visualize. Okay, and so here's Mike. So one interesting detail with the drawing is knowing how to position or draw wrinkles, and I've done it for both Mike, Retron, and a couple of other characters as well. Interesting fact. Okay. Sorry, late night. Yeah. So this story, if you're wondering how many drafts it's gone to, yeah, it's gone through all sorts. Like this story looking at, like it's not just this story getting improved. It was entirely new premises. Like there was even going to be much longer stories where you would have the main team and they bounce off from one member of the Legion to the next, and then they would all come together in the finale, which yeah, that sounded too big and varied compared to what I've done here, where it's just a little bit more simple. But in the main team, Mike was almost the leader, and yeah, Kyle, well, sorry, Zami used to be part of the team. Yeah, sorry, Zami used to be called Kyle. I do apologise. But yeah, Zami has always been part of the team. He did used to have normal gadgets, but he eventually got the lightning abilities to make his whole tech stuff a bit more, stand out compared to other fictional characters. Sorry. And so yeah, I did swap out Mike for Nicole. Yeah, just because as Nicole is slightly older in her age as well, it's to make her more like a mum figure of the team, which I kind of liked more compared to Mike's role. Yeah, it's just when putting Nicole in that position, it seemed to work quite well with. Yeah, I just got better results and I just found it a bit more interesting. Anyway, so as you'll see throughout the story, yeah, tablets are used in bases a lot, and this is own kind of objections to have, to demonstrate what kind of future advancements are there. We've been able to create projections, and these are all the main Legion members so far. So you can see Nicole, Pardon, Arvin, and their abilities, and a rough profile of them. So yeah, this is where Mike and Kyle have their first meeting together, and Mike is really good at, I guess, keeping people together or keeping people, retaining their interest or getting that back for the team. That's almost his role, well, in certain cases anyway. And yeah, being able to give Kyle a second chance somewhere, and even if, again, much later in the story where Zama used to have another go in the team. I've probably been calling Zama Kyle a couple of times. I do apologise again. It's just trying to get used to a name change. And I called Kyle Zemi because he's an alien. I wanted to go for a more alien name. So yeah, that explains that part. And so yeah, this is pretty much the next stage of the story. The status quo has been set up or setting up, or the status quo but setting up changes later on. And yeah, Kyle's about to go in the team, and with Cypher and Orpheum having their own little discussion, yeah, it could mean a bigger threat for Earth as well. So yeah, this is where it gets to that part of the story. Let's go. Here you have Zami's first time with the Legion, and the Legion have their own building nearby the base. Totally different walls and floors. Good time to yawn, isn't it? And so they have these trials, which they would have. For in fact, I think these would be happening after this book as well, considering the practice. And in book 4, there's an instance where Pod's training in these scenarios did help pay off a situation later on, which I'll explain later. And so yeah, this is what the leader would normally be having, and this is Kyle's first one. And yeah, if you're wondering, he's just hacking into the circuits to stop the whole trial, meaning putting these barriers down, probably shutting down the practice robot as well. Yeah, it doesn't have a name yet. I'll probably give it one, or you could always suggest in any of the commenting areas or my survey even. Oh yeah, to which yeah, if you do have your own improvements, or if you like to take part to my survey to improve the story in any way, whether it's before watching this video or not, then oh yeah, I'll just like to see what the results are like. But anyway, going back to this. So yeah, and as the paragraph says, Nicole has wanted to improve the teamwork of the team, and these would be done often, as well as the undercover missions, trying to help with that as well. And yeah, as well as like the main rifle, like gun Nicole has, she does have her pistol as well. It would shoot the same kind of lasers. And yeah, like any other secondary gun, it's used as a backup or at least an easier item to use, especially with one hand. And yeah, I think yeah, Pod's looking at Kyle here, but he's noticed that Kyle is like trying to hack into the machine. Yeah, definitely not something that's part of the trial. And as we later see, Pod and Kyle have this back and forth where Kyle is very stubborn and Pod isn't keen on that stubborn nature, you know, considering what we find out later. And yeah, let's go. So as mentioned, the two have their own conflict, and in stories, it's normally quite neat to have characters in conflict with each other. It makes story more interesting. It helps it progress at different parts. So instead of characters always having the same way they treat the way no, sorry. So instead of having characters behave the same way all the time with one another, having that change over time and does certainly makes the story more interesting. So yeah, there you go. You'd be able to learn a couple of new bits and bobs from these videos, or at least show what kind of knowledge I've gained to create these books. These stories were I did use not used to because I did try to pay attention to make sure the stories all neat and stuff. But with this storybook format, it is made simple, especially to keep it short and punchy. You know, almost like a children's book. And yeah, and so for those who don't know, this digital book format, I'm not sure if it exists or not, and probably evolved or just generated an entirely new way of entertainment. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my AI animation, crossover animation to mix the work together in that way. Yeah, I haven't seen that attempted elsewhere. If there is, then yeah, I'm sure that'd be interesting. You can always put that in the comment section on Wix as well. And if you're wondering why Wix, not YouTube, it's just Wix has the a swearing ban almost, considering I want to keep most of my content for a family friendly audience. I know I have the montage videos you lot like for those who like those kind of videos I create. I know they're not necessarily for children, but at least you can control the restrictions on that. But anyway, yeah, going back to this. So yeah, a good demonstration of conflict, and there's other kind of character conflicts which exist in the story later on in another types of between one another. But I think in this case it's just only these two in the story. And you can see it's not only the size, but Pod's more experience, hence why Carlos losing this fight here. He would have been someone who thought he could fight, especially with the kind of knowledge and superiority complex he would have had. And later on in the story, you would find out that he's actually getting nervous to fight. Just one of those situations where you think you can face them, but you can't. But then you can. I'm just giving him some advice. So anyway, let's get going. Alright, so quick note. So as you know, there's the reading versions of these books where they're put on their own little website. And funny enough, the previous, the following scene has Orpheon, which does take place before this scene, which, yeah, small mix-up, but I think when looking at both, I think they seem to work okay, unless, yeah, after reading these loads of times, I haven't found any problems. But that's another thing with stories. Sometimes you have to order scenes correctly to get the information and events, move naturally in a way that's satisfying. And oh, I'm just going to notice. I think yeah, so these. I think these are older pages before the improvements, where it's visual or word improvements. But regardless, I'll still be talking about the scenes in the way I do, regardless. Yeah, this is another visual thing I do. I think it's kind of cool to have Windows present the opposite side like this. I've done other variations as well, just with different type of windows, but in this case, do it like that. And yeah, like any format like this, if having a scene represented as a single page, you can see Nicole telling off Pod, Mike wondering about Kyle, which links up later about Mike getting Zammy back into the Legion. I can't keep calling him Kyle. And so, yeah, and Zammy tries to walk off. Oh my god. Oh, god. I wonder if anyone else has been in this situation where they, have a new name for the character and then they're like still stuck on the previous one. He's definitely called Zammy. I'm not going back to Kyle for him. But anyway, yeah, let's move on. Okay, and so this is the villain's next scene. So yeah, Orpheon is getting upgraded, which explains why he isn't involved later on, which is, you could say it's a tad contrived, but, it does kind of link how Orphan gets living gore later, living gore being the life-based element, and still has a load of forces and help which can help him along the way. This is the base, and this is a small bit of information. He's getting, he's contacting his other troops, you could say, and he's foreshadowed the tanks later on, which both the Legion and Dion have later on. As some of you may know, Dion used to be called Dan, so if I've ever do that kind of mixing as well, I do apologise. But yeah, this is what the inside of Orphan ship looks like. Not seen too many times, but you'll see the ship later on. And yeah, I was minorly inspired by, you might have seen King K. Rool's ship in the, what's it called, Donkey Kong Jungle Climber. Yeah, that's the DS climbing game, not the Game Boy Advance. That's King of Swing. But I did used to like the in and out of King K. Rool's ship with like the green and almost looking like a creepy ship, and especially with trying to make things edgy as well, and also trying to like if Orphan is a mix of greys and greens, then yeah, that's the kind of visual style I was wanting to go for. And this would be camera feed going from outside the ship as well. This huge ship would be sending the other ships later on. So yeah, let's go see the ships. Yeah, earlier I thought we were seeing ships, but obviously not yet. But this is an important scene as well. So as mentioned earlier, it's not just the story overall on paper during its planning stage. It was also like the book of each season. There was 54 pages in each season at one point, and one example was the Legion having their own scene and the base having their own planning scene as well. But it's easily communicated that both sides, all even Orphan as well, they'll all be planning. But just showing the Legion planning, it just keep everything nice and simple. And if they're the focus, of course, you would need to show them the most here. And yeah, even on the map, you can see the base, the Arctic, and a forest-like area you'll see later on. There's this idea I have to make Earth a bit more like Pangaea, but I think after seeing Earth on the outside, I don't think I've stuck with that idea. So you could probably interpret it as going from America to the Arctic, and then what would be next to it, like Europe. Just like ledges, or just like those small bits that point out of a continent. I think they could be them, but you never know. It could be nearly going into Pangaea, in the future. That is an actual scientific idea. But yeah, this just demonstrates what kind of setting we would be going. What kind of settings you would be going through as the story goes on. And yeah, there was one page which would have shown Kyle's vehicle going through the water, but because that scene is cut, you would just have to assume awesome as Tone is driving on the water, which is a bit silly. Oh well. It's tricky to say, this scene was later, therefore that would explain that plot hole in the story, because when you're creating a story, you don't want to rely on comments like these or deleted scenes to when evaluating the story, because everything of the story needs to be there. Because if there was like severe plot holes in the story, and I just created a whole new type of media which covers all of the plot holes, like a new type of website, sure, it would fix them but not solve them, because those missing pieces aren't in the story. And also the Tone going from this Greenland to the Arctic, that's not it's not properly sold. So advice for anyone creating a story, or just any story based media. So yeah, there you go, small lesson for you there. Overall you can just get the idea that the planning, and Kyle's not there yet. You could, if going from cinematography theory, you could say Kyle's meant to be in this spot, or could represent Mike, but because he plays a role in the base, he's the general. He can't be involved with the Legion as much as he wants to, especially later on as you find out that Mike is he's helping with the battle later on. So yeah, let's go and see it. Alright, so the previously mentioned ships or vehicles, well, here you are. So aside from, actually I think this might still be the case, all of these, well, nearly all of these vehicles, but throughout all 5 books, hang on. Yeah, sorry, so all of these 5 books, I've created 3D versions of the vehicles I wanted to make, especially with the colours, and then I drawn on top of them to make the ships not 3-dimensional, because not gonna lie, I'm not always good at drawing 3-dimensionally. That would also explain why some of my artwork for these books can be a tad weak at points, but I definitely do want to do that for the ships. And so, yeah, I got the serviceman ships and the Nitrobot ships, and you can definitely tell which is which, especially as we see in the servicemen earlier. That's what I meant to say. And so yeah, this is the awesome tone as well. So if you see my Instagram, and there's my Instagram, sorry, there's a 3D model I've done of a ship I did in college. I think it's around 2017 or 18. Yeah, I took that as inspiration for when creating the awesome tone, especially when it comes to its final form, where it's able to fly instead of the version on wheels. You know, it's just from how much that vehicle stood out, I definitely wanted to carry that over. But yeah, I think other vehicles have just been experimental with shapes, and then yeah, I'm seeing what I've got, and yeah, I find them pretty cool. And speaking of the ships, I think I just come up with a new video idea. Could demonstrate those 3D models in the future. So yeah, let's move on. Yeah. Also, a quick note, thanks to PowerPoint's calculations, when I said this is a video for all 5 books, there will be videos in all 5 books, but not put all in one. I'm definitely going to go one by one, hence why there will be a playlist of these videos as well. So just a quick note, and to clarify some confusion earlier. But anyway, this is what the Awesome Tonus looks like. It's a ship that I wanted to make it look big, almost like the ship from WALL-E, the Pixar film, where it's just the right amount of bigness, you could say, you know, just nice and roomy. And to be honest, I think I would have liked to add more features on there, but for now, just you know, only apply the more important parts. You know, there's the back entrance of the vehicle, and then to have their spots for when creating whatever. And yeah, so I just thought for plot hole, if you know, Nicole tasked them to the creative machine, you know, I suppose she would have been fixed on driving or walking around, but even then, you know, that's just a small minor problem I've pointed out. Anyway, so you see Kyle making his suit, you know, which would have helped convert the lightning that comes from within him because of the type of race he is, and then you have Alvin helping create the energy absorbing machine, which we'll see later on. And yeah, and when, as well as like character conflicts, there are moments where you can link characters together in some way. So for instance, as well as Kyle and Pod's opposing views of you know, how they use their ego during any situation, and then you have Micah Retron, to which, despite being small, they're still opposing sides for the Legion, which is quite relevant to the story. And then you have Arvin and Kyle, who have their interest in machinery. So yeah, that's definitely another aspect. And if you're wondering about Arvin, he is another alien of some sort, but he was inspired by a Martin. I've actually been up and close to one at one point. Yeah, the Chestnut Centre, which is no longer around. That's somewhere in England, but I had a special experience, and yeah, did that, and yeah, was quite up and close to it, so it'd be pretty cool. And to add him to the story as well, you know, he's a kind of dude who probably would fight and climb around, and so yeah, Pine Martins were definitely a good inspiration for that. Anyway, next part. Okay, and so this is where the conflict reaches. I think this is probably not the highest point, because in the story, like you had the first half which builds it up, middle, you know, where it reaches a peak, and then it de-escalates as the conflict is getting resolved. But yeah, this is just one of the more building blocks where, yeah, Carl gets defensive of his stuff, you know, which is another character trait which is demonstrated. Yeah, small side note, you know, all of any like page or aspect of a story is meant to showcase each part, you know, just various traits of a character. So in this case, you know, we've seen that Carl's defensive of his stuff. Arvin gets curious, which pays off later when he got curious about the tank at a point where he got kidnapped and brought up to the Nitrobot ship, which we'll see later. And yeah, it's pronounced Nitrobot. Yeah, just let you know. and yeah, and Pod and Arvin are also quite close as well. You know, both being animalistic like characters, and you know, it definitely shows Pod being someone who he's one of the more pacifist like characters, but he will take extremes if it gets in the way of peace in some way. You know, in this case, you know, Arvin might have been threatened, and so Pod, you know, came clashing in to try and, you know, tell off Kyle and stuff. But yeah, that's just the kind of yeah, that's just part of his character. And then yeah, here's the front of the Awesome Tone as well. This massive window you would have seen, and with the chairs and controls as well. So yeah, let's move on. yeah, I do apologise. It's just wondering what else to say. Like I said, it's non-scripted, but yeah, as long as you learn more about these things, and then it's fine, isn't it? Okay, so as the book states, the vehicle was later found, Kyle's vehicle. So with the battle nearby the base, that is almost a distraction to keep all the action there, and then the Legion start making the way. Hence why the awesome team was hidden behind the hill earlier to indicate that. But but in this part of the story, they found out now, and it's going to be more pressure and going to be more dangerous for them. Sorry, I forgot I had my English muddled up at one point. Who knows? So yeah. Oh god. Third yawn today? I think so. But anyway, yeah, you have a so even if it's not moving, action you can present in various ways. So for instance, you can tell the Nitrobots are the aggressors in the situation. The Legion are having to defend themselves. You can see they're not going to be as safe later on in the journey. You see another ability of Arvin. You see Dion getting pulled into this mess, and then you have yeah, just if anything, it shows almost parts of how divided the Legion is. The whole teamwork aspect is definitely lacking. There's hardly any, no cooperation in this case, compared to later on. And also, by the way, Pod's not lifting the Tony's in his trident. Yeah, you can see a small overlap there. It looks like he does, but yeah, that's not the case. It's just the explosion making it go like that. And not to mention, probably a bad assumption, but the reason why actually, it doesn't appear later on to see. Sorry, I don't know. There's a part I don't know in my own story. I thought, yeah, Dan was, attacked, which made his flying go off temporarily. And then, oh yeah, he does stay for the training, and then he does leave after the Arctic. I was trying to think if I did draw him to the Arctic. I think it said anyway, I do apologise. And also, not to mention, Dios was another name idea for the character, but yeah, Dion is the final name. So, yeah, this should be fixed with all these pages. I am sorry for all of these minor errors, just because of what my weekly what my weekly routine's been like. But with all of these problems getting spotted, I can try and sort them out in time. Anyway, so let's just see what's actually there. So I think I've said everything. Yeah, I guess what we've got to say is that if you're wondering about the design stages of these characters, yeah, I think they're all been the same. Pod used to be a black orca, but because of the black outlining, which is used almost everywhere, and I say almost because cases of energy I've presented as, without any black outlines to, make them now pop a bit more. And Dan used to be like grey in the face with a blue body, like a lighter blue, but the colours I've gone for instead here does make it stand out. It's just trying to use certain colours for certain aspects, and it's sorry, going off in a whim, and it's just also my phone notification distracting me as well. But anyway, yeah, let's get on to later on. I can always explain more about other character stages regarding the design. Okay, and so when it comes to a story, there are certain types of scenes. I could be wrong by saying this, but the scenes can either be expositional, quiet, or action-based. And hang on. Yeah, sorry about that. Got these disturbances. And here, and you would have seen variety throughout. But this is definitely an example of a quiet scene where it's time for characters to get to know one another and react to their surroundings. And scenes can do multiple. As shown previously, it's an action scene, but it still demonstrates how characters would have felt about the scenario. Nicole would have been shown to be quite annoyed at the team for the lack of teamwork. And then you also have this one, which is covering a interesting topic about humanity, because Dan's one of the, in fact, probably the most powerful good guy characters, and you have Nicole, who is, I think, power level wise, she's the weakest, I think, but she still has all sorts of really good traits which makes her stand out as a fighter. The leadership, the experience. She's a long range fighter as well, and she's also a medic. Healing herself, and she does heal others later on as well as the story. So yeah, definitely makes her stand out in that regard. Because yeah, this is like another minor theme of the story. Covering certain bits and bobs about how to use power wisely, and how characters decide to use it. And both of these characters, what they have in common, they are experienced, they have all sorts of abilities, but they are wise with them, and yeah, that's something you would see more later on. And yeah, Dan is an Ichbot, a different type, and a quick note before I forget, Zemion, who's Dan's creator, he can be seen in that battle scene in season 3, the flashback, the elemental wave scene, which is almost probably one of the largest piece of lore or history in the story. I just suddenly realised that, but I do like keeping my lore simple. I know this is like my only main story, but it could be applied to my animations as well. But it's just compared to popular media nowadays, where lore and history goes totally out of whack and it keeps getting piled up. And even if I have future ideas for these 5 books, I definitely want to stick to the lore and history that already exists, but just wisely expand on it over time. Anyway, enough with the ranted. On we go. I feel like I keep saying that a lot. Okay, and so this is the closest to a training montage that exists within the story. So as you can see, the outlining could have been better. It's almost trying to do a split screening effect while also taking part in different parts of the ship at different times. Because as you can see with the artwork, it's just make sure all your outlines are different to represent something, something certain. Like have the, for the body, and have like medium-sized outlines, and then the small outlines for the faces. It helps keep everything neat and retaining the boldness of the artwork. And as you may have seen, I've just spotted this just now, a couple of painting errors there, which I'll definitely fix in the future. But yeah, so Kyle is learning different things from different characters. So Nicole is learning, despite being kicking, Nicole is the kind of fighter who would be focused on taking down. And an example of this would be when she took down Abassnas at one point during book 3, when they're on the mixed alien planet, and he's telling Abassnas off for his behaviour, or her telling him off, sorry. And so, yeah, even if, although you could say that's actually, yes, Nicole is a defensive type almost, and yeah, push kicks, can be a defensive method. And all of this training from Kyle, later pays off and helps him fight for the rest of the story. And then you have Pod, who is more of a boxing type. Nicole may like you losing the legs, but Pod is the kind to use arms. And you could also see later on that when it comes to other morphils, to which that's what Pod is, a morphil, which funny enough comes from the scientific name for an orca. Not exactly called a morphil, but it's just taking a minor aspect of an orca's scientific name. But yeah, they have like powered punches, which you'll see a couple of times, and so yeah, Pod would definitely carry that through. And as we know later on, all of these Legion members would be taught different fighting methods from one another, which represents how being mixed can provide benefits. Even Pod later on, as well as the fighting style he's learnt before, he has other fighting methods he's been taught, which helps him fight against the other morphils in book 4. And so yeah, there's that you can see, and tried to mirror one another, almost a kickboxing guard and punch. And yeah, I do kickboxing. I try and carry that kind of knowledge through, as well as other knowledge of martial arts, because I do quite like martial arts. And then you have Dan. No, not Dan. I've done it. Dion. He's the kind who would knock a move away quickly, or a counter-based attacks, essentially, to which Dan can teach. And because of the super flying, he's quite quick on his feet. Not just like the flying through space. He's quite quick at his movements, and he can perform speed boosts as well. And so yeah, he's definitely would be effective when performing those in battle. And yeah, he's fought up close a couple of times, especially with Orphean later on. But also, like Nicole, he does have the machine guns, which makes him more long range. So yeah, this would take place. I think all of this takes place in a single day. Probably would have taken longer, going from and to the Arctic. But yeah, maybe there would be a dusk later on. But yeah, I've just tended to avoid colours like orange and yellow to make the colour palette a bit more consistent. But hey, it's just a minor continuity error. Okay, so this is where we go back to the bad guys again. So after Orphean is like, oh, I just sent some soldiers to this unknown vehicle, and they've been sorted out what happens next. And so that's where he goes to Zone 4 for some extra help. And that's where Zone 4 offers his Vescoons, and you can get a bit of an idea about them. So if you are wondering about them by name, it's Ravicon, Molug, Ekron, Asteroidin, and Bunking. and you can get a small idea what each one's like. Like Mullig's a servant, Ekron's a loyal spy, and then you have these two, which are like the bigger ones of the team, with Bonky being a bit more sleepy and Astrudden being a bit more intimidating, and Rebecon's the pair and Mullig's the servant almost. So yeah, this is where Zyphor does offer help, because even he would be curious about, if like these servicemen fighting Nitrobots, like it would be challenging for them considering they're people, but yeah, the Nitrobots being sourced out by like a smaller team, yeah, like that would be quite curious, and so yeah, that's how the next step goes along. And if you're wondering, this is the second day of recording, so it may feel different, but yeah, apologies for that. And I say a quick fact. So yeah, if you remember, this is the Dark Fortress. This chair used to be red, but obviously, I tried to keep, a more narrow colour scheme with the blues and greens, and so that's why Steinfort has, no longer has a red chair, and it's a chair which almost matches his skin colour as well. And even the goons kind of possess parts of Steinfort's colour scheme with the greens and greys, even the blues. Just add to the overall colour scheme, and even because he, as I thought, well, the Dark Fortress, or what, much better name for that, really, that lives far down to space, because normally when it comes to space travel, you tend to go upwards. This is like a bit direction of down, if going out to space from the Earth. And it was going to be space that's red, but I did decide to keep it blue, as you'll see later on. But anyway, yeah, let's go. All right, and here's the Arctic fight. So yeah, there are. So the main part of it is Kyle's training, and it pays off, and he's able to fight off on his own force goons, which would have been well trained. You could say it's a bit of a stretch to be taught quickly and then be able to counter that, but it's like this journey. If it's going from place to place, you can imagine it's somewhat long. Like this would have taken like this the adventure to the mountain, which is also nearby. That probably would be hours, especially as a Zevson battle with the Nitrobots. That would have been under a single day. So yeah, so if coming up with an improvement, a better passage of time would have helped. Maybe like a sunset or clock, who knows? And not to mention there's complicated to where Enzime does release his hat, which I think I could have kept on, but never mind. And I say like as an update, that's the second day recording. I've lost software access, so yeah, that is a story for another time about how I do have a couple more videos left to release alongside these ones, but I think I will be going on to another break soon. I just thought to give you that awareness, and then I'll be working on all sorts of bits and bobs. And one thing would be more of a novel version of this book, because to spread more of its awareness. That's why I'm going to be working on that. So the software access to these came about just in time. Anyway, back to the story. So yeah, this is the Arctic, and so as you can see, the Atone crashed into the ice, which has relevance later, because one good thing in a story is after each success there's a cost, and if the success is by fighting off the goons, then later on the cost would be the Atone loses its function, because yeah, it's just the ice and the damage it would have. Yeah, it does affect it later on. But yeah, regardless, you have a fairly nice shot. So you can see Monken's close nearby, and then you have the others who are a bit far away. To be honest, I think that could have been improved better. Maybe they should be a bit more further, but hey ho. And you can see both of those looking at each other. They're like the long range people, and you can see them all combating. And not to mention Astrudden's in the water as well. Pretty nice detail. But yeah, this is definitely one of the only white locations, because when it comes to like the colour white, it tends to look unfinished in certain places if trying to use the colour white. But excuse me, but yeah, with the Arctic, because it's familiar of how white it is, that's why it works here. The only white environment, you could say. Anyway, let's move on. And so with the Legion fighting off the goons as well, and even Earth having more of an upper hand of the fight, I say there was a detail which I have accidentally missed out. I can always fix that in the novel, which, yeah, you could say either one's third-party media. It's, sorry, I just suddenly noticed a bit of miscolour in there. Oh well, never mind. So yeah, despite representing the same story, they are like different mediums of how the story is told. So even if like the book reveals extra bits, it would be extra bits for like just to get more information, because this is a simplified version of the story. But just because I do that doesn't automatically like make that fix in the book. It doesn't really fix that. And the reason I say this is because if you're doing that approach with me. I'm just educating you. Please have all the relevant details all in one story. Don't like create a product and be like, oh, I'm just going to create this other thing to fix the problems. No, that's not how it works. Like, you can't spot a flaw in Harry Potter films and say, oh, it's fixed by the books, because that's not how it works. But anyway, so yeah, as mentioned, so Dion is out of the picture. So from the book, it's almost like if Dion's had his chat with the Legion, and Drake and Kyle as well, and then he's off. You don't see him in the Arctic fight. What was meant to happen is that he loses his fight temporarily, and then after helping the Legion, to which you could probably imagine him help with the Arctic fight a bit. Maybe he helps bring the Arctic the Atone out of the ice. You can imagine him doing that, but there's no visual indicator of that. But regardless, he does go back into action before going back up to space with saving multiple planets. He does return back to the Serviceman battle and gives like more of a winning edge. No, like just more in Earth's favour to win the fight, thanks to Dion's help. And yeah, this causes the retreat because if Orpheum is determined by how his race is losing numbers, then yes, it will be safer for Orpheum to make a retreat. And he does have the developing tanks from earlier, which will act as more of a springboard for him. It will help with. It's just like a backup plan, which does later pay off, as you can see. But yeah, you can see the Ninja Watch ships they're making their way, and yeah, you can see all of the good guys watching up, and there's Retron and Mike watching the craft go as well. And also a bit like Zion, even while some of the villains have minor colour scheme bits of like their own design, which is applied to their own goons or ships or whatever. So yeah, interesting detail you'll see later on. Anyway, let's move on. Alright, so when I said about the Atone not properly working, well, there you go, it's stored, and it said that did I put that? Oh, I hope I missed no detail, but the base was to pick up the Atone and bring it back to Kai's house while the Legion make the next step, which you'll see afterwards, after finding what was needed in the mountain. But yeah, it's kind of weird where you have like, your own reasons that apply into the story. Yeah, please don't do that, do check your stories thoroughly. But anyway, yeah, so this is more of a forest. So yeah, there's a better version of the forest in the following book. Yeah, much better than this, yeah, because it looks like just some green land and the trees have duplicated across. Because I wanted each setting to like feel different, and even with any other planet, I'd want to add a variety of scenery to it, and yeah, that was just my attempt. And even the way this Atone is angled, I didn't quite understand that, because this is a 3D image I've drawn on, but yeah, the angle could be a bit better. And not to mention when I said about the idea of 3D videos earlier in this particular analysis, yeah, as you can see, those videos have been out, the 3D versions of the ships, which not only show off my 3D skills, but there would have been the templates for when drawing them. Like every frame is a possible template for these vehicles. And so yeah, that somehow this is slightly executed, and a very tangent there as well. But anyway, so Pod does have the machine, which is said to finish. Zami and Art finish the machine together, which indicates them getting on more. And Carl being able to fight with the team, it's pleased Nicole, as said 2 pages ago. And so yeah, it looks like the Legion made a good step, and even Dion joined the team earlier on. That seemed to help as well. So yeah, even with no Atone, they're gonna walk all the way up to the mountain. So let's go there. What I have found quite interesting with like when the story, each book used to be like 50 or so pages longer. In between would have been shots like seeing the mountain and making the way there, but to make it quicker in its pace, it's just going from the Legion being stuck to then making it to the mountain, and they're already facing the challenge of trying to get hold of the life force in the machine, which is underground, and it's Pod who did place it there after he was taken to Earth, and yeah, so the Legion are trying to fight off sentinel plants and animal spirits, something which is expanded upon later, not just with the life force, but other types of energy in general. For those who have read all 5 books, you'll get more of an idea what you mean. But yeah, you can see, the team are much closer together, more teamwork in material, you could say. I also like the minor detail of Arvin's temporary evolution powers as well. That's kind of cool. And not to mention, I guess another improvement, the size of the weapons with the characters has been a little inconsistent, I have to admit, because you have to draw those by scratches to the 3D model, which I guess I could have done, not to mention this missing bits of colouring and everything. But yeah, I guess as long as it maintains its traits, then it's okay, but even then maintaining size is something I will definitely work on both in my own time and if I release any more books in the future. And also, as the second day of recording, I do have a character guide which has, well, it's currently in development at the minute, but those will all be linked in all of my video descriptions as well as their books being promoted. And it just gives you a lot, an extra bit of information about all the characters, all the types of species and planets. Yeah, it just helps you get into the story more, and that will be in a website of its own, but it won't be as advertised because I have no video creating software at the minute. But anyway, so before we move on to As Inside the Mountain, you can see by the grey walls, and this is a setting we do come back once in another book, which we'll get onto later. And also, these animal spirits, these are races of characters we do see later on. So I guess minor spoiler, you have a Titaran, Pasnos's race, Hailwolf's animal form, and then you have Torrid's race as well. So yeah, those you'll get more detail on for those who don't know as much of the later books. So yeah, let's get going. Okay, so I reckon this is one of my favourite shots in book one. I definitely like, the size and perspective. It definitely works much better here. A lot to work with, or a lot to see as well. So yeah, once again, nice teamwork, and you can see how they approach their problems. Like you have Nicole and Kyle, who tend to be more long range, and then you have Pod, who's more of an assault being. And I say, I think something else that could have been done more is, although you do see more of it anyway, because in book two and afterwards, that's where Pod does get more of an idea of how the trident works, because it embodies fire, ice, and water. But yeah, I think you could theorise that if there's been no such ability that's occurred throughout book one accidentally, you could say that it just acts as an assault weapon, and you get them to just taught more how to use it better. But so the power of the trident is either extremely minimised or doesn't exist in book one at all. But regardless, it is nice to see where Pod first starts as in terms of his power level. And also the tanks. Tanks in general are one of my favourite vehicles, and I've made a actually I just suddenly noticed. I think they could have been with a couple of lines there to make it a bit more like a correct block. Yeah, I think it's missing a line. Anyway, but yeah, I just tried to create one which can spin 360 and a couple more assisting areas as well. And this is a horror vehicle as well, hence why it doesn't have any wheels or treading parts. I don't know the features of the tank yet. And these green vines, so small Easter egg. So these green lines, that's like living gold struggling to be maintained in the machine, because as you read it, the life force is strong enough to try and get out of the machine, and so it's been a causing minor influence. And in this case, living gold manages to. Sorry, living gold is the alternative name of the life force. That's what stops the tank in the end, because the tank is powerful metabolical stuff, almost like that is, and that's why Orpheum definitely took time to create these, because there's one tank here which is to try and get hold of Living Gold from the Legion, presumably as Orpheum may have. I think that could have done, both been expanded more in the book, but basically Orpheum is like, these must be probably heading to where the life force is at. So let's send the niche box. If not, let's send the goons. Try and stop them, try and find them, get information from them. But if not, we'll send this tank, which also has. The tank has its device to try and get hold of in the life force, actually contain it as well. But because Arvin has traits of living gore as well, it could be understood that the device has got confused between the two, and Arvin's taken instead of the life force, which definitely something that can be interpreted and it makes sense later on, especially at later points, which we'll get onto later. And you can see that the mountain is still part of this foresty area of Earth as well. But anyway, let's get going. Yeah, so before I continue, as I can see the video is getting long, I do apologise for the filler, and that won't happen so much later on. But anyway, let's get on to it before any more filler adds up. So, yeah, the Legion get picked up from the base. The ultimate home, whether mentioned or not, it's back at Carl's home. And with Arvin taken, that's where the next goal is, if we could find Arvin, that would mean finding Orpheum as well and actively stopping him. And an interesting detail, so when it comes to story structure, you have something called a midpoint, where it's like its own little goal within a story, but you still have the main goal. So the main goal is to stop Orpheum, he's causing all of this havoc on Earth. And with the midpoint, the Legion yes, we got hold of living goal, we got hold of the life force, it's in a safe spot, but we still need to stop Orpheon. And as you know, Orpheon always has his own little bit point where he's trying to attack Earth at first, and he may still have the tanks, but that's where he does have another idea as well. So yeah, as you can see, he's a very strategic character, with the battling stuff, definitely more of a trait of his compared to other villains in the story, even if there are similar aspects between villains which could be improved, but hey ho. But yeah, as you can see, it's back in the Legion building, a room and a building which could do with a bit more character, I guess, but you can still see with the wall colours, and you can presume it's part of a corner, or maybe like a mini room of some sort, which has a laptop, which could also be drawn better, by the way. And yeah, you can see they're both in think. But overall, this is them trying to track Arvin. But yeah, the collaborators, they haven't been established. Yeah, they haven't been established in the book at all, but there was this idea they all had like their own devices to keep track of each other, and even temporary Legion members would have them. But if that's not been established, I guess you could presume that it's still trying to find an Orpheon ship, because that's definitely where Arvin would be taken. So yeah, I can definitely assume that. And not to mention, this is a three-way conversation, and it's more of Pod having a go at them too, and they can sort of see how Carl and Nicole are trying to probably make the best out of the situation, trying to be level-headed, and Pod, who likes Arvin, also, but likes him, cares about him too much compared to the other two. Yeah, so he's a little bit rattled by that, which then leads to the next part. So yeah, so after the midpoint, there's a sense of seriousness that builds up before the low point, and this is the kind of stage we're heading into. So yeah, Arvin's been nicked, the Legion are arguing, and a couple more things will get worse before the initial low point hits. Sorry, hang on. Sorry about that. And also, yes, also worth mentioning, because of the way the videos versions of the books play out, you're unable to see this image as much. And so, if you remember, Orpheon sent his tanks. Livigor helped get rid of the Legion's tank, but the other tank was sent to Dan. And yes, just sent on another planet. It's just to keep Dan away from the overall conflict, because Dan is driven by sorting out problems that no one else can, or problems that are definitely not attended to. And so, in this peaceful planet of blocky stones and moss everywhere, yeah, Lydan's the only one who can stop this. And as you can see later on, it does take a lot of time, especially as the tank is quite a powerful mechanism. And here's a race as well, like a circular being of some sort. You don't really see him very clearly. But regardless, so you can see that Arvin's been captured, no thanks to the device, sorry, and with the living gold traits which Arvin has, which, by using traits of his living gold power, it helps with Orpheon's plan later on. And you can also see in the writing that Orpheon, has had odd traits of living gold before, and he could presume that because these Nitrobots are living beings, and despite being robots, and so with minor traits of life force, that's how they're probably to be trying to find like the main source of its power in the first place, and that's what's led them to Earth, and Orpheon and Design work together in terms of getting that one out of a few forms of energy. As I just noticed a missing full stop there. Punctuation mistake, I guess. But what's also kind of interesting about this scene is, although I say before moving on, something else which hasn't been, I think this I'll add to the normal version of the book, because Pod is more of a pacifistic character, someone who doesn't like to cause violence as much. There is to be more of a dynamic in this book where Nicole is the kind of person who definitely would kill anyone for safety, not mindlessly, but these Nitrobots, are definitely worth getting rid of, especially. And something that I didn't want to say as well, because the bit of a spoiler, no more Nitrobots after this book, other than Dion here, and after finding out these are living beings, that's what Pod could be a bit unnerved about, and in that idea of his challenge, especially as Pod is eager to get rid of Mechajaw, but of his former leader, but at the same time he's a bit unsure about fighting other beings. Yeah, so that's not that's an idea, something interpretable, something that could be in the novel, but it's not really touched upon in this simplified version of the story. But it's definitely an interesting idea, that's for sure, because this is what these stories are about. It's knowing how to use power and how security can vary in ways, and the pros and cons of it. Anyway, so yeah, so going back to the scene, so I guess you could say this is like a stereotypical villain backstory segment where Orphan explains that he has been going from planet to planet to keep his race going, but not only are those planets attacked beforehand before settling, but the planets used to source more nitrobots, which is still at a lower number, and so yeah, Earth is like the next one, and so yeah, you can definitely tell that yeah, it is like a slightly sympathetic motivation to keep his race going, but yeah, he's still killing planets. So yeah, he definitely needs to go. That's been something I've noticed in a lot of stories, and I think other people would pick this up as well. There can be cases where people try and create sympathetic villains, but they end up looking like the good guys because sometimes you have the heroes which are like, oh, I have this tragic and bad thing, but yet I'm the good guy, and the bad guys are like, oh, hey, hang on, good guy, what you're doing is a bad thing. But sometimes the story will still frame them as the guy and bad guy, despite almost looking like the opposite because of what they're motivated by and what their goal is. But that's should be the case here because the Legion, all they're doing is trying to stop all of this trouble, and Northin is causing it. So it's definitely clear here. And anyway, yeah, let's get going. So hopefully this should be mentioned in the book as well. But the base's shields have been up for some time, and there was a moment where the Nitrobots, because they're established to be quite good at hacking, that's where the base's shields are down, and that causes temporary destruction. And yeah, this is the wall of the base which surrounds the main building. It probably would have been nice to see the destruction. I think it would have in a previously planned page, but it's just about keeping the story nice and short. But this is another. I like this shot as well, but once again, it is just improving the size of the people. But regardless, you can see, the Nichbots are coming in, and you can see the next step of their characters, and how it links to the writing above. So, yeah, Carl, I was about to say Zami, but it's all of them trying to keep living goals safe within the base. Everyone's trying to help him fight, but this is almost getting a bad jab, even if the Nichbots are at a level. And not to mention, Orpheum would have finished upgrading as well. Not sure if that's been said or not. Could be clearer because otherwise, people were like, "Wait, hang on, he's just finished upgrading now, and he's just in time to join this battle." And spoiler alert, they're like winning the end. So yeah, apologies that could have made that clearer. But as you can see, the niche bots do end up being successful, not just because of what the Legion are like, but because of Orpheum joining the fight as well. He's definitely a formidable foe because, never mind spoiler, in book 3, Orpheum does kill Dion's creator, or just pretty much one of the overall Nichbot creators. So yeah, Orpheum's definitely a formidable foe, and he would have probably won against this fight against Pod. And you can see there fighting head on. Pod would probably wouldn't have had any help, which could have tied to how Pod is like losing his trust in the Legion, so he's trying to fight Orpheum alone, and that's like an off decision in the end, and how that's presented in an opposite manner, as in Pod does fight with the Legion against Orpheum next time. Yeah, so interesting transition, and not to mention, yeah, Living Gore isn't used in this. It's not featured in this battle compared to what's later on, because what helps Legion succeed against a tank fight, despite getting more into the seriousness, is Living Gore is almost like a group play strategy, and it's worked with the tank, it works with the final battle, but sadly it won't work here, especially if it's trying to keep the life force safe in this instance. And it's also Zami trying to, well, actually it's just both Zami and Nicole acknowledging people more. Zami's decreasing more of his ego, trying to be more considerate, and probably trying to be more of a team player, especially if he's getting close to the Legion, as in distance-wise. And then Nicole is being more acknowledging as well, because apologies if that's not stated clear enough, but Nicole was the kind of character who at first is like mission first and then the needs of people second. But in this instance, it's it's getting more to that, because you could sort of see how Nicole's like, oh, Legion, please get good at the team working, and then she has a good go at them earlier, and they like to the chat with Dion, and then Nicole being pleased that the training worked with the Legion, so it's almost like just breaking down walls between them all, which makes them all, just nicer together, so they bring a brainless team that can actually be buddies as they fight alongside each other. So yeah, like I said, it could be expanded in the novel, could be improved here slightly, but I think from minor visual cues not just from the visuals, you can sort of see how Nicole definitely is slightly more different in this case. Alright, so probably one of the simplest shots in the film, the book rather. So it's just simply, although Orpheum is already green in the eyes, which already like links with how the energy source kind of has its own presence depending on which book it's represented. So in this case, if it's the life force being the primary energy source of the story, then yeah, that's like one of the representations, Orphan having this green eyes. And I think that's something that all the nature bots could have had, even Leon and the Zemion later on in the story. But anyway, so yeah, with the more presence of lime green, hang on, sorry about that, the only filler, I promise. So yeah, with the more green elements, even these eyes have lit up as well, so it definitely shows that Orphan now has living or the life force in its grasp, and he's able to make the next step. And it's because the Legion's teamwork has kind of fractured, and yeah, so Carlin probably would see more and why the teamwork is needing to be done, and not protecting Livergold himself. We could say it's him, yeah, because he like the whole overconfidence thing has definitely not been sorted yet. That's more you'll see traits of that later on in the story, but it's him, learning more about why teamwork is important, and he's decided to help in the battle more so than protecting Livergold, and yeah, so it's almost learning more about why people should have asked for help or why you should have listened more to Nicole's instruction, perhaps. It's empty to interpretation. And then you have Nicole she's gone too much into caring more about the people and the task. And then obviously you have Pod, who has lost his trust a bit after losing Arvin, which has made him try to sort everything alone, which is almost similar to Dion, almost learning that, he does need to, when it comes to problems he's not always capable of, he does need teamwork himself. So as you can see, because in any story you have characters who are more flawed, therefore need more screen time with development and stuff. And yeah, the main three Legion members, I mean, those three, aside from Arvin, because he's not so much of a character that requires change, he's almost just like a representation of a theme almost, despite having his own personality. Dion almost has I guess just his own like little development, which is small and it probably carries through the rest of the story. But he's far more wise and has his own little aspects in the story as well. So that's why he's not indeed as much screen time. But it probably it just depends on when it's to be extended upon more. But anyway, yeah, let's get going. So I'm not sure if this is the first instance. This is something that's appeared sometimes, like visual bits and bobs that isn't like the real world. Like for instance, you had Bonking who was sleeping. Therefore, you had the Z letters, and they have Pod with a speech bubble, imagining Arvin getting trapped. And as mentioned, there are a couple of aspects like that to make the visual storytelling better. And this is another location of Earth where it's a bit more rocky, somewhat inspired by like the Lake District, I guess. Where there's areas where rocks poking up, it's kind of neat. But anyway, in the story, yeah, by the way, Pod's kneeling or crouching, that could have been better performed, but regardless, so because of that loss of trust, and also as said by the paragraph, Pod's trying to make his own steps after the loss of trust, but he can't really make his own way if he's not ready, because he's had a rough history, and if Alvin and Orphan do need to get sorted in their own manner, then Pod is still needed. Not just needed, but he also needs to do help solve those problems, and needs to do it with the Legion. And so this is which is reinforced thanks to Nicole. And you can probably somewhat imagine that Pod's getting this kind of mindsets before before Nicole persuaded him to think otherwise. But I think that's more open to interpretation. So yeah, this is definitely where the low point is hit. After a rough battle, the Legion are stuck in their own their own little mess, and now they're just trying to get together. And I'm not sure this, and this hopefully should be said in the book, but Zami lost his, he was kicked out of the base because of Retron, because although, like I said, I think that would, not like I said, sorry, another interpretive thing is that if, Zami was to be tasked with protecting Livigor, and he's failed, if the Nitrobots got hold of it, then, that would have led to, Retron kick him out of the base, or you could have this other interpretation where Zami is probably left himself like Pod, and so he goes back to the Awesome Tony, going back to more familiar territory. And I do have to admit another story improvement. So Zami was not only is the Awesome Tone like his greatest feat of engineering, but as somewhat shown in the later story, he about the overall 5 books, as he craved like his own kind of attention, he was going to go from planet to planet. So instead of seeing that at the start of book 5, on a spoiler, he's trying to perform that at this stage. So yeah, it could have been said clearer, could be said interpretation, but like I said, I think those story beats could have been filled in probably another page, because another idea I had was like if Mike was to give Zami another chance at the base, Retron could have been like, oh, he has one more go, but if he falters again, then he's out. So yeah, it might have been said in the paragraphs. I know, sorry, I'm not very good at remembering what the pages are saying, but yeah, I just had a lot going on. Um, but yeah, so yeah, that's just the kind of through line the book is pinned in alongside. Yeah, so yeah, you get what I mean. I'll stop with the rambling. Let's get going. Yeah, not sure if I said this before. I'll say it quickly just in case. But the car's vehicle, it was inspired by a ship I've made, which you can see in my Instagram probably 2017-18 time in my Create Today all ambient occlusion spaceship, which was kind of neat. It's definitely had more detail compared to Kyle's final vehicle design, because on my Instagram post I had front propellers, a name spot at the top, and there's more points everywhere. But when I was younger, I used to think the more detail, the better. But no, it's definitely about making an idea more three dimensional and just neat and memorable. Because yeah, when you look at Super Mario, he's only wearing his overalls, but he has a nice cool design that's memorable, and a couple of tricks you can see about him as well. Like for instance, the moustaches, the hint of the Italian characteristic of him. So the reason I say that's because not only is that why the tone is far more simpler looking compared to their inspiration from my own previous Maya creation, but that's why these characters are made them as simply as they are. Like when I've drawn them in the past, I do have more to them, but because of my tight schedule, and thankfully I did make it tight because the loss of software access. But yeah, it's adding enough details to get the job done almost. But if I have more time, probably add more to them, and they would need to be better by being more three dimensionally drawn. But anyway, yeah, it's just as long as you get just like an idea overall, then yeah, I guess that's the standard. I know, could be better. But anyway, in this part of the story, so Zami's got the time, or had the time, to complete the automaton. It's now a flying vehicle, and this is also Kyle's house, by the way. A totally different wall and floor, which we don't really see again, I don't think. Yeah, not Kyle's house or Kyle's garage, and never really planned that part. Apologies. But if it's only once, you can see why the plan wasn't done as well. Oh, sorry. But yeah, this is the part of the story where they're like, oh, Zami, you tried your best earlier. I can see you've improved. You tried to do protect life force. Don't let Retron's firing get to you, or don't like abandon us with the ship. Like I said, there's a two-way thing on how you can interpret. And so yeah, you can definitely nice detail that Nicole is trying to treat Carbot like a person more so than a brainless soldier requiring orders, almost like a robot. So yeah, she's definitely acknowledging how she does need to open up a bit more, which is almost the overall part of her character, because as you can see later on, there are different ways on how she is to being taught more about or it does almost like socializing, I suppose you could say, her own socializing problems, and that could while her backstory isn't explicitly stated outside of a couple of lines, like for instance book 2 and book 4, you would see more how Nicole and Mike do have a good history together. But I think overall you could imagine, Nicole's probably been training a lot at a point where her emotions kind of gone aside, especially if you're older and you're trying to remain level-headed about problems, which is both a positive and a negative. And by the end, she's been still that level-headed person, someone who's level-headed during battles, but she just needs to be more open. And yeah, that's almost like the the basics of the character, which I've tried to explain. But yeah, yeah, I think the more backstory elements could have been added. That can be done in the novel version of the book. Anyway, yeah, I'm on this long enough. Let's get going. Okay, so we're on to another neat shot, and I say one decision I'm pleased on myself for making is that when it comes to like trying to create an iconic ship, you think, oh, let's have it like shoot lasers and missiles. But if Kyle is say being electricity, why not crowd that power into it? He's a person of lightning abilities, and so that's somewhat applied here. And while they're not explicitly drawn in any part of the book, the atone does have, well, it's planned to have like a front turrets, one at the top, one at the bottom, almost like the Millennium Falcon, where it has its own turrets at the top and bottom, and it can like go around. So that's somewhat the idea with the Atone having a top and bottom turret, and even side turrets as well, which you could say represents how Carl is more of a team player with having these turrets being shot by Nicole and Pod, and even Arvin later on, and Carl is doing the piloting, which isn't stated, but you would infer that thanks to the later books. And something I thought of, if he was not a team working person, then why create the extra turrets? I guess you could say that he probably was going to make them automatic. Now they could still are while getting teamwork help. Now could be either an automatic or manual option, or that the Legion could help with other bits and bobs like repairs or organising parts of the ship while the ship shoots on its own. Yeah, I think that could have been shown more, I reckon. But for now, you can see it's just an overall help in the battle. It's the servicemen trying to fight against the Nitrobots. Then to the Legion, alongside Dan as well, who's just a little dude there trying to help. So yeah, so the overall battle, it's once again servicemen against Nitrobots. And another thing about story is that when it comes to stakes, you want to make them bigger and bigger over time. And so, in terms of the base, they've gone from a land battle to a space battle. And you can also see that because if I'm not sure if I said this in the book, it's definitely more in my synopsis material. But if Earth is shown to be more futuristic, then you can see how far they have gone. If space traveling and combat is this accessible, then yeah, that's evidence of Earth's advancements. And you can sort of see that in Carl's gadgets as well, or Zami's gadgets. So I haven't made a name mistake in ages. So yeah, Zami's almost a representation of evolved technology and how it could help security in various ways, despite his characteristics. But yeah, you can see Orphean in the window of his ship here, and yeah, that's his big ship as well. So minor inspirations. So for those who played Donkey Kong Jungle Climber, so I'm not sure I said this or not, I don't remember what I said in the previous recording, but King K. Rool, he was often Donkey Kong's foe. King K. Rool had a really cool ship, and yeah, obviously, like any inspiration you want to, you don't want to take too much from it. And in this case, it's, I think I'd just overall like the scale and the massive wings, and the rest I've somewhat tried to make my own. So yeah, it's just a more simple ship here with muted greens, when King K. Rool's ship was almost like King K. Rool, but if he turned to a massive spaceship because he had his facing cape and crown on, which is kind of cool. But like I said, I can't really carry that through because that'd be too much copying. And so yeah, you can see how his ship is bigger than the others. You can tell it's a ship that's houses an entire race as well. So yeah, let's move on. All right, we're nearly there. Let's get going. So another bit that I did like about King K. Rool's ship was it wasn't just the outside, but it's the inside as well. Because when you have a level inside the ship, I was thinking, oh well, it's quite intimidating. And one part of the intimidation was like the use of colours. Because I didn't have too much. Well, this is only a hangar base. You can presume it's nice and plain, even if though it could do with more detail. But you can see that there's a passage for the ships, definitely space protection, because as you probably could infer, because of Orphean's upgrades, him and Dion can adapt to space, but if these Nitrobots are being fought off in space, then you can interpret that, they don't survive in space because of their more inferior design. You could say, oh, but they're robots there, they're made of metal, they don't have oxygen. Well, not every type of machinery works in space, and this is a rule I am going to stick to. And yeah, if you're wondering why I just said that, it's just because another tip when it comes to like establishing rules or how things work, that's what you stick to unless further information or explanation or anything that's just stood out. So in this case, if Daeon, probably Zemion as well, alongside Orpheon, if those are the only Nitrobots that can survive space, then that will be the case. That kind of rhymes. So yeah, not that the Nitrobots make much of a presence in the story, and unless I have like a prequel idea, because I'm more of a sequel fan or a spin-off idea person when it comes to wanting to expand these books. Yeah, Nitrobots aren't going to be as much of a presence, especially as Dion is to be the last one. But it's just useful tip in storytelling. Please keep rules consistent, otherwise you'll confuse your audience. Because for instance, if I made like the Nitrobots, then adaptable in space without explanation, people will be like, "What?" But because they would have all died in this battle. But anyway, so just going back to the story. So yeah, Dion does help the Legion get hold of Arvin. Arvin, oh my, getting confused. And so you could say, if Dion is also learning about letting other people solve their problems. And yeah, that's more of a so the case later on, but in this case, it's just more so of Dion already playing his role of helping others, and while the Legion just simply take the time to go through the battle and enter the ship to safely get hold of Arvin. Orphean and Dion, can just quickly fetch Arvin. And I've even had this cool idea where Dion is the one to not only save Arvin and try and get hold of Orphean as well, but he pretty much destroys the whole ship. But yeah, I just had to keep the page numbers low. But definitely would have been a cool idea. Definitely shows how powerful Dion is. He could, I think that could have been, definitely novel improvement, something that could be stated in the book. So yeah, it was planned to have Orphean at least cloaked or hidden, or if as mentioned, if Dion is motivated by trying to solve problems that no one else is solving, then you could say that if the Nitrobots aren't doing anything aside from Earth, which has also been somewhat sorted anyway, then in the meantime, if there's no problems, I'll help. But if there's other problems going on in other planets, then I would rather see to those first. And you could say, oh, but it's Orphean though. He's the leader of this bad race which Dion is trying to attack. But if Earth managed to win against the Nitrobots, then yeah, I think Dion would be able to, like, even though Dion does help a couple of times in spare time, it's still prioritizing other tasks first, and other people are capable of doing so. It could be, better shown in the book and be explained in the novel. And actually, I guess you could say that this analysis somewhat helps with additional, story details, or at least trying to clarify bits and bobs, or just trying to explain my intention at least, even if these books need its own improvements. But anyway, yeah, no more rambling. Let's go. Okay, so the space battle goes on, and while you can see both Dion and the Legion trying to, go through fight the space battle, they're also trying to fight Orphean as well. Yeah, Orphean's not too different compared to how he looked before, considering the upgrade ideas. But you could say that his overall body's stronger, maybe a couple of upgrades in the inside. But yeah, regardless, I think he could have done with a more visual difference. And he's also not glowing living gore as well. I think that could have been really cool because it just looks like the previous page of him. Just looks like he's just absorbing it as it glows, and then it's like fully in his weapon or system. And also, it's a weapon that's also missing because if his because he wouldn't be able to absorb it because Nitrobots can't handle forms of energy. But yeah, it's either gone and he's probably picked up later, or bits shrunk. If that's how the weapon works, I'm almost trying to make things up in the spot. I do apologise. But you can see that Orphean is just trying to fight Dion in space, and yeah, Orphean would have had that ability to fly, and I've also planned for Orphean to lose his flight, to which is why the battle then gets grounded to Earth, or their flight anyway, and Dion once again loses his flight, which is definitely shown better later in the book. And yeah, you can see the Legion helping as well. So they're helping the overall battle as well as trying to stop Orphean. And as mentioned, they do try and the Legion to get another star to give Dan another boost if Dan does get awfully damaged again. And it's also said later on in the book that that tiny race that Dion tried to defend from the tank, well, they end up helping him in the end, which shows that even if Dion is like a massive power level, or at a massive power level, doesn't mean he still could get help from other people, and it doesn't mean that other people are inferior, and that's what I think that could have been like more of an interesting trait. The Legion being like, hey, Dan, we may be more powerful, but could still help. Yeah, I think that could have been stated more so here. But I think because if Dion isn't the kind of character to arc, I think those are bits and bobs he learns, but he doesn't need to change as much as Legion do, because most of what Dion acts upon is not so much about flaws, but it's trying to make the best decisions. For instance, if the Nitrobots is being helped, okay, well, this planet isn't getting any help, let's sort them out and say, hey, would you get that idea? I've already made that rumble. So yeah, let's go on to the next good shot. Alright, so another decent shot. So the only problem I have is Dion, he's meant to look like he's closer to the camera, and with these people being further away, but yeah, you can somewhat see it here, but not, yeah, it's definitely a perspective thing that could have been improved. And I got mildly inspired by Terminator, with the damage shown with like bits of your face missing, so that's something I've tried to attempt, as well as a missing leg, and that is what a single star can do. Dion, completely help reform his body, and I'd say an interesting fun fact when it comes to, you know, how, like, the many times I reformed this entire Legion story, I've always had the first battle's outcome to be a weapon in the ground that's disrupting Earth. And, you know, in this case, it's helping form these Nitrobots, and, you know, it's definitely affecting the ground. It definitely would cause danger on Earth, you know, especially as most of the forces are up in space as well. So this is definitely all up to the Legion. And I think as an improvement, it could have had like one of, well, me. This is my fault. Yeah, probably me. You have one of the characters try and fight these off. But you could either say that they do in between, or you could have like the Atone being remote, you know, considering none of them are in the ship. Yeah, like being on drone mode and sorting them out, or maybe these Nitrobots are slow enough to not to be able to participate in the battle. But as established, well, also shown in later parts of the story, any spell or any form of energy, it's stopped by, you know, killing or disrupting the source of the energy. That's definitely the case with how my magic system works, you could say. But yeah, you can see the Legion are more cooperative. The Livigors performing a helping hand, especially as you know, Arvin here, he's managing to disrupt the. In fact, this whole greenery could show a disruption in the process. So the Nitrobots are stalled with their progress, and Living Goals like going against Orpheum, because there's this. It's not really shown in the books, but there was this idea, which is still possible if I, you know, create extra material for this story. Like because as the main forms of energy they have, with the life force being one of them, there was this idea to make these energy forms a bit more sentimental and, you know, have a prior living form. And because, you know, these are powerful energy forces at a point where, you know, they can't be abused. But if they are abused less, then that means, you know, they will, like, you know, backfire, and, you know, that's what's happening to Orpheon. It could, and I guess another interesting detail is that, you know, Orpheon's alone is trying to create this fake army, and he's also, like, you know, putting his selfish intentions before considering others. You could say, I think that's how Orpheon could be represented as the opposition of the theme. And you could also say that Living goes almost on the Legion's side by taking down Orpheon as well, because, you know, Orpheon's another Nitrobot like Dion. And while Dion is most likely, I could say, more powerful, he does have more interesting feats later on in the story, which can make a debate whether he's more powerful, Dion or Orpheon. But maybe, yeah, I think it's easy to say Orpheon's more powerful here. But regardless, you know, you can see the Legion do, you know, stop him in the end. And I probably would have liked it if Nicole and Zama were shooting as well, you know, to aid Pod in his up close combat. And yeah, the whole Living Gore thing with Arvin, you could say that could have helped with this process as well. Well, stopping Orpheon. But anyway, yeah, let's get going. Okay, and on to interesting shots. So this is like one of those shots which is minor, and but yeah, I did decide to keep it in. There are, you know, as you could imagine, there's a load of other scenes which could have been applied, you know, such as how Zama was out to the base, or how the Legion found the mountain, or how the base was first attacked with the shields down. Yeah, so it's, you know, it's not only trying to keep the story short, but it's trying to see how they're connected. And I think the writing on top, I think there are definitely some good attempts of connecting pieces, even if there's improvements. But regardless, this is a small shot and scene which I have decided to keep in. Again, I think it's kind of neat considering later on the story. You know, Dion's the last of his kind, and after, well, as the Legion sought out Orpheon, you know, Dion did decide to help the Surfacemen up in space. And once again, writing or visuals could have aided that, but, you know, it definitely goes back to, you know, the Surfacemen could do with more help, considering the Legion probably had the upper hand with, you know, going against Orpheon. Although I can imagine Dion helping the Legion a little bit, especially if he was given a star afterwards. But yeah, I think that probably could have been explained or shown in some way. But yeah, so I guess you know, minor spoiler, Dion does die in the end in the last book, and so for him to be the last of his kind, you know, you could say that it's reflected back on Zemion, you know, making him one of a kind, a Nitrobot, you know, the kind to keep on saving Orpheon's finally done. So this would have been a yearly process with John trying to help the galaxy while Orpheon is doing no good. And it could say that Dion could have stopped the Nitrobots earlier, but you know, these improvements I could do with making, but, you know, the Orpheon could have been hiding or cloaked somewhere, and Dion's just preoccupied himself immensely. And there was also this one idea of the Nitrobots being everywhere, but that's more of design forcing with the amount of Magoons all around the area. But considering Zymfor's a bigger threat than Orpheon, you could say that Zymfor's been more of the focus for Dion compared to Orpheon, although Orpheon killed Zemion, so surely he would be more motivated to kill Orpheon, but but Dion's a robot, so I don't. Yeah, it's not a revenge thing. It is just something that definitely needs to be done, and his emotions tend to be a bit more simplistic as well. Sorry, that was a whole load of bits and bobs of my story, which is definitely not in these books. I do apologise. I know I'm going against my own rule. I'm such a shame, almost, but I want because there are videos on YouTube where they say, oh, could have improved it by this, and this, or you can infer it as this, and this. I think it's still interesting. Well, I still can make the source interesting, but most of all, it's also acknowledging my problems, how I can improve in the future, how I can improve this, and it could probably help you a lot how to improve your own stories as well. And another bit to explain. So when it comes to explosions on fire, normally they're red and orange, but as I'm not having any red and orange in my film, they're blue instead, which you could probably tell is an explosion, but that probably could have been done better, a bit more transparent perhaps. And here you can also see he's the last one standing with only servicemen ships around. But anyway, yeah, let's move on. So this is an example of two different scenes that was then merged together. This has happened tons of times when books had to shrink. And so this is doing two things at once. So firstly, Don is like, hey, I'm a temporary Legion member. I can help you when you truly need me. As you know, I'm saving all sorts of planets, not just Earth. So you carry on doing your thing, you do well at it. But if you do truly need me, I will either keep out for you or you can request my help, which definitely ties in with future parts of story as well. See, he's back at the Bleeding building. I don't see why the wall is a similar colour to the sofa, but you can say it's lighter. Oh well. And I say another interesting detail. So when you had this select tool and you're painting over it, it's creating this white edge. I don't know how I do it, but I actually really like it. It kind of makes Pod suit more shiny. There was an idea to make him wear an ice, just like a light blue um, clothing because it's forming ice all around his body to make an armor of ice. But I've never really drawn that before. Many times I've drew the characters outside of the books, but I think not only is that too complicated, but the light blue is used in all sorts of ways. So it's just narrowed down to Pod having his own armor instead. It's basically a hardened swimsuit, which yeah, I think all of the Morphils wear it, but Pod probably wears a different one that's been repainted. Definitely something else up for interpretation. I could always create like a Pod spin off where he's like, oh, I'm going to change the colour of my clothing. That would be a neat detail. But anyway, Mike is missing his wrinkles. He's meant to be one of the oldest person outside of Dion. Dion's about 100 years old because a significant event shown in book 3 takes place 100 years ago. Not sure that's stated. Um, but yeah, her second oldest figure, so he's meant to have his wrinkles. But you can see that Dion has a new member. Pod is definitely happier. He's definitely got his first trust in the Legion again. I think that's meant to be Arvin as well. He's out of the page, poor thing. Probably looking at him. But I've always had this idea to, where Mike's like, oh, you can always go when you like to go, and Pod's like, nah, I would like to stay. Which you can somewhat see now I said it, but once again, this is just missing writing or visualization, which could have been improved upon. But regardless, Pod is definitely staying. He's definitely happy, and the trust is definitely there. And I think that could have been done with looking more like a window, considering how I presented windows earlier. But yeah, just another visual improvement to be done, but you can always see it's a window as it's Legion's building as well. Okay, so as you would have guessed from the previous image, the Legion were successful. And so with Orphan Dan or the Nichbots gone, as you can tell, this would have harmed Zynthor's forces. That's a bit of a tricky way to say Zynthor and forces. Yeah, never mind about that. But yeah, because as you would imagine, Orphan is an entire clan of his own. Well, no, the Nichbots are, sorry. So yeah, this is a big loss for the Dark Fortress, meaning that this Legion means business, and they do need to sort them out. And another detail is that this is a jaw sharp, or is it? Yeah, I would say it is. That's a race that appears once more in book 4. More of a humanoid shark, similar to a Morphil, but entirely different creatures. Something which I, funny enough, made up about 3 years ago, I think. A good portion of these characters in this book have been characters I have made up years ago. And some, in fact, I've always kind of put them together as inspired by the Avengers instead of trying to draw random character designs. And there are still yet so many other character designs which I would like to use in the future. So you'll see them hopefully in future books of mine. But for now, they'll either be dropped in the novel, perhaps if I want to add more races, and you still can see a huge portion which are in this book. So yeah, Mother Dark Fortress, looking at space, as I've all been disappointed, and this jaw shop is a infiltrator. So this you can imagine. So I'm not sure if this is said in the book or not. Hopefully it is, or probably stated later. But Zone 4, because he's after the forms of energy, he's trying to get his many other allies to do it for him, and also protecting himself as well. And that's definitely more hinted later on in their books as well. So, but he still has plenty of other allies, but no Orphean and Nitrobots. That's definitely a massive downgrade to him. And I think, yes, Ekron. Yeah, this is Ekron. He saw that the Legion did win, and Monarch continues to be his servant as well. So yeah, on to the final page. Once again, the video version of the books. Oh yeah, might I just say I do apologise for the text and speech part. It's because my throat sometimes hurts after speaking to you, but even just now I had to take a break. Not to mention my reading skills is a tad off. So instead of needing too much time, I just thought a text to speech and natural-ish one with subtitles would be the best approach for now. No, could be improved. But in the video version, so it does sadly cover the top half of the president's face, so you can see him now. He's definitely an aged dude, and as you can see in later books, Retron, Mike, and the president, they're almost a trio, a bit like the Legion here. You could say Arvin is a fourth member, but he's like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the pet they have. You could say, oh, he's like the fraud to the five members because there's Appa as well. He's like the ride for the main trio. So I think that's just the case with the Legion here. And if you've been wondering, has the 13 always been like that? No. Mike was almost taking on Nicole's role, and Nicole was almost like the leader. But I had a better vibe with Nicole, considering she's more of a mobile figure, so I wanted to expand on that by making her part of the team. Sammy's always been there, not always the primary character, but because he seemed to be more interested, that's why I put him in the forefront. Pod, I don't think I was added until later. He used to be a beluga whale, I think I've already explained that earlier, but because thanks to Valas, another character in the second book, he was a killer whale. Killer whales are known for being strategic and kind of aggressive and battling in nature, so all the Morphils are killer whales. And even there was going to be other like Morphil-like creatures, I had a gorilla, a lion, even an octopus, but it was just better to make them all because even Mechajaw was originally like a blue crocodile, but now he's a more menacing Morphil. So yeah, there you go, fun fact. And the Legion used to have like 6 members. I had, Bionate in my early animation videos with multiple personalities. He was in there, but having him would have been too much considering the other personalities. I had plenty of other ideas with him. Like, for instance, he has like the menacing personality, which breaches during the base fight and makes it trickier. But as you can imagine, just he was almost like the smart character as well. And not only was the base enough, but all these characters are smarter in their ways. I don't want to like play on that stereotype of that. I like that if they're already smart in their own way, especially as Sammy's not only the lead character, but he's the smart one, Cole's the leader, Pod's the tank, and Arvin's the pet. That's always like the archetypes they're playing off of. I used to have a ninja character, almost like the powerful one, but yeah, had like serpent powers, which would have come from Living God, but I think they were just adding too much. And there was also this idea of Zami merging the lightning powers with the Living God abilities, and he does merge with another element, which you'll see later on, but yeah, that was just that mix, which was cool, but it was just added fat. And even in book 5, in page 2, that was another creature that was going to be another member. He was almost the pet, but he actually spoke. He had super speed. He was too small. He too was small like Arvin, and I think he too got kidnapped as well. And almost him and Barnett had the like their own little bond, but that was then shrunk to have Arvin have their own bond as well. I had a Titan in the team, Titanmans, which are mainly prominent in book 4, almost like the tank. So, for instance, if Hulk was like more of a tank compared to Thor, that's going to be like a Titran and then Pod, but no, it's just might as well keep it simple by having a Pod. And because like sometimes we do want to create a film with a team, you're like, oh, should I go big or should I go condensed? But after watching one of my favourite films, Cool Runnings, they have a nice compressed team with their own traits and abilities. I just thought, yeah, let's just go with that. A bit like Star Wars as well, even though that's about a team of 7 or whatever, it's still kept nice and simple, which I seem to jive with a bit better. And but yeah, it's more history lesson. But yeah, so Mike Fretron, the president, as kind of hinted, they all have their own history. They're all almost like the heroes of their time, which you'll probably see more later on. But yeah, the president rules the world. You have Retron, who you'll find out is a bit under the rug because of how old and the injuries bringing him down. And then there's Mike, who seems to be optimistic, has this Legion idea, which has proven to be successful because with the Legion, it used to be a trial, but now it seems to be a solid idea. Which, yeah, definitely a nice ending for this first book and the first chapter. Now the Legion together, what's going to happen next? So hopefully that's a good enough cliffhanger. But anyway, so this is the end of book 1. I won't keep you any longer. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you found the video interesting. Apologies for the improvements and the filler and some head canon I was coming up with along the way. Like I said, they can be improved either in here or the novel. But yeah, I just hope you enjoy them enough, and it's a nice new lore instead of more Marvel or more Star Wars. You have more another like lore you'll get into, and one that will not be as stretched. I promise you that, or at least won't let it be. But anyway, yeah. Have a good day, and thank you for watching.